who's tuning in from the States. I know you've got some unwanted excitement there. So I hope that everything will straighten out and calm down there at in Washington, and democracy will prevail, and life will go on as semi-normal. We are starting a new book of the Torah, Sefer Shemot, and we are going to play the name game, as I said in our intro, because the name Shemot means names. And as we've learned before, the first place you want to look when you want to try to get a handle on that particular Parsha, you look at the name. These names were given, these are ours. You know, the chapters, those were of non-Jewish origin, but the separation into Parshiot and the names of the Parsha, this is of rabbinic origin. So the names were chosen for special reasons. Obviously, when it's near the beginning of the Parsha, you know, that lends itself for the name. But when we look at this Parsha, and again, to understand and try to really delve deeply into what the Parsha is saying and what it means and what it's trying to teach us, we have to really be students of the text. And as we look at this Parsha, which begins with names, Shemot B'nai Israel, Habayim Mitzrayim, the names of those who came to Egypt, something should jump out at us, very, very puzzling. Why are we beginning this Sedra with the names of B'nai Israel? Is this something we don't know? The Torah usually doesn't recap. I mean, this isn't like watching Netflix and then you see the first minute or two, this is where we left you yesterday in the previous chapter. The Torah doesn't usually do that. And here we find it very puzzling. The Torah lists Yaakov, Ishu, Beito, Ba'u, and then the names, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun, B'nai Leah, and on. Why? Don't we know that? Way back in Parshat Vayishlach, and if those of you taking notes, you can look at Perek Lamed Hey and Psukim Chaf Gimel, and there you have a full accounting of the names. It wasn't that long ago. Nobody new was born, nobody died. Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, b'nei Leah, b'nei Rachel, b'nei Zilpa, etc. All the names are there. Did we have to recap them here again? Then we have a reference, Vayihi kol nefesh yotzei yerech Yaakov shivim nefesh. 70 people came down to Mitzrayim. Folks, we had that earlier too in Parshat Vayigash, in Perek Mem Vav. We have the list of all the 70. Did we forget those names? Why do we have to have them again? They're not all listed here, but there's a reference to them. And then we talk about the death of Yosef. My dear friends, Yosef already died back in Parshat Vayechi. We just read that last week. We know that Yosef died. Why are we beginning the Parsha with all these names? It would have made a lot more sense to begin with Pasuk Chet, Vayakam Melech Hadash al Mitzrayim. We are entering the saga of Avdut Mitzrayim, Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Makot, etc. That's where this Parsha really should have begun. So that's the first question. It gets, as Alice would say, curiouser and curiouser, because as we move to Perek Bet and we read this, another puzzle jumps out at us. Vayelech ish mi beit Levi, vayikach et bat Levi, vatahara isha, vateled bain, vateroto ki tovhu, and this story of the birth of Moshe, right? Vatetatsev, Vatetatsav, achoto merachok, vatered bat paro, lerchotz al hior. Something very strange is happening in these first 9.5 psukim that deal with Moshe's birth and adoption by the daughter of Paro. What's missing here? And we students of the text see this so dramatically, there are no names. Where are the names? No less than 8 pronouns are being used to mask the characters. We call them a man, a woman, a daughter, a sister, a son, a mother, a nurse, a child. Where are the names? We know who they are. We know that the Vayelach ish mi beit Levi, we know that that's Amram. We know the Bat Levi is Yocheved. We know that the sister standing at the edge of the Nile is Miriam. We know the Bat Paro is Batya. And we certainly know that that little baby Hebrew in the cradle, in the floating cradle, in the tiny ark, we know that that's Moshe. Why are the names missing? Replaced all of them by pronouns until we finally get Vatikra Shemo Moshe, Vatomer Kimin Hamayim Mishitihu. Why did the Torah leave that out? I mean, that's not coincidence. That's the Torah hitting you over the head saying, would you people notice what's going on here? Well, the answer is the Torah is trying to make a transition. We are really, truly starting a new chapter in the Torah, but also in Jewish life, in Jewish history. We are moving away from those powerful personalities that occupied the first book of the Torah. These larger than life individuals, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and on and on. And there were a few others as well. Yosef, of course, and several others, around whom everything revolved. It was all about them, about almost superhuman personalities. But now we are a nation. Paro calls us a nation. He's the first one, but we are becoming a nation. We are transforming. And the collective must take precedence over the individual person. And even though we will have strong personalities all through the rest of the Torah, in particular Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not going to be strictly about them. It's going to be about the nation. Even Moshe Rabbeinu makes this declaration in his typically humble, self-effacing form when he says, and he refers to Israel, Ha'am asher anochi bekirbo, the nation of which I am a member. He's not the whole nation. He is one member of that nation. Yes, obviously a very extraordinary member. Nevertheless, he's just a member. Shesh meot elef ragli, he says. This 600,000, I'm just one of 600,000, Moshe says. Now you might argue and say, well, you're definitely, more than 1 in 600,000 or 1 in a million, but that's how Moshe sees himself, and he's presenting that and saying, this is no longer about personalities. This is about the nation. Nevertheless, even though it is going to be about the nation and our struggle as a people, as our struggle to become a people, and everything that that entails, the Torah is trying to tell us we cannot forget from where we came. We cannot completely leave behind those past powerful personalities. We have to begin by remembering them and citing them and giving them kavod. These are the ones who guided us from our inception as a people, essentially from Abraham. They set the standard for our moral behavior, for our spiritual power. We descend from them. They prepared us for the future. And therefore, we have to remember them. when we're called upon, when we're called to the Torah, we're called by our name and the name of the past generation. That's a way of indicating that whoever we are now, we're a product of the past. And that's why we're called by those names. You don't see that in other cultures. I don't know Napoleon's father's name. He's not called Napoleon Ben so-and-so, but we are known and we remember our name includes the previous generation. That's just a subtle or maybe not so subtle way of saying we have to give credit and never forget from whence we came. There is, of course, another element, and that is that our individuality should not be lost within the anonymity of the nation. Yes, the nation is crucial. In many ways, the nation comes first. The tzibur always trumps the yachid in halachic terms. Achrei rabim lahatot, we follow the law according to the majority. Nevertheless, the Torah is saying your individual, intrinsic, personal essence must also be respected. That's part of the standing, the Tselem Elokim, the godliness of you, that you are a person unlike any other person in the world, in creation, in history. Nobody's ever been exactly like you or will be exactly like you. You are indeed special, created specifically because of what your capabilities and strengths and skills and talents and gifts and blessings are. When we look at societies that try to eliminate the individuality of people, the Nazis turned people into numbers. The communists would call everybody comrade, as if they don't have their own name. Your name is what gives you a certain essence. And that's why Shemot is beginning with names. Sometimes, even in the British Secret Service, so the secret agents, 007, the late and great Sean Connery, right? That if you remember the great song by Johnny Rivers, Secret Agent Man, I'm giving you a number and taking away your name. The name is gone because, they don't want to have any record of you if you're caught. It's as if you didn't exist. So no name, right? The 007 or M, but not a name, because the name establishes your presence and who you are. Therefore, these first 7 psukim are coming to remind us that even as we enter the nation, which in a sense, as a nation is nameless, and that's why all the names are temporarily removed and replaced with pronouns. Nevertheless, remember from where you came and don't lose your individuality. If you have a shame, you will never have shame, so to speak. We can mix a couple of languages there. Moshe Rabbeinu also, before we move on to another important name, Moshe Rabbeinu's name is also crucial. Moshe has a lot of names, and there are a lot of different opinions. The Yalkut Shimoni lists the following names that were Moshe. Tuvia, or Tov, because it says in our Parsha that they saw that he was a Yeled Tov, whatever that may mean. He didn't cry. He was born premature, by the way. He was a preemie. He was born at 6 months, according to Chazal. And he didn't cry because that would have attracted the notice of the Egyptians who were looking for the babies in order to kill them. And that's why when he reached 9 months and they expected, they had a list of the pregnant women and they knew who was due, that's when they came after Moshe, and therefore he had to be put into the river. But one of his names was Tovia or Tov, Avigdor, Yered, Chever, Avi Socho, Shmaya, Avi Zanoach, Ben Aviatar, and Levi. So he had a lot of names, but the name which he kept and which he's known by is the name which Bat Paro gave to him, based essentially on an Egyptian named Musa, and a lot of discussion about where that name came from, but the Pasuk wants to put a Hebrew spin on it, Ki min hamayim mishitihu, for from the water he was taken out or drawn or pulled. Of the Sforno, and we've said this before, but he has a beautiful comment and says, technically, that is wrong grammar. If his name is supposed to indicate from the water he was drawn, his name would not be Moshe. His name would be Mashui. It sounds strange to us, but that would have, some of the other names sound strange too. It would have been Mashui. Moshe doesn't really mean, says the Sforno, drawn from the water. It means Moshe, he who draws others from the water. In a sense, his mission was encapsulated in this name. He would be the one to pull the others, to pull his fellow B'nai Israel, Israelite, Hebrew brothers and sisters out of the morass, out of the slavery and the degradation of Egypt. And so his name is particularly crucial because it defines his mission in life, which of course he lived up to so well. So the Torah was not out of line in naming this Parsha Shemot, because names are crucial. And we come also to the other name that's discussed here, and that is the name of Hashem. And an interesting concept about God's name. In Perek Gimel already, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Anochi Elokei Avicha, Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. He identifies himself, first of all, as Anochi. Anochi is the name of God. It means I, but also it's the name of God. The Aseret Dibros begins with Anochi, and it's a unique word in and of itself. But here he identifies himself, I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Moshe doesn't really leave that alone. Moshe, and you know, he probes further, and he says, I'm going to confront Bnei Israel, V'amarta lehem, Elokei avotechem shalachani aleichem. What he had said, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. But that's not sufficient. V'amru li ma shemo. They're going to ask me, what is his name? Ma omar lehem. What should I tell them? I mean, it's a strange question, because in this very pasuk, he identifies God as the God of your forefathers, but he wants to know something else. He's looking for something else. What is God's name? Now, this is a strange question because, you know, Moshe is not the first Jew. We have the Avot. Surely they prayed. Who were they praying to? What name did they use? They must have called God something. And didn't they pass that down? Why didn't Moshe know that? Why is he saying to God, what is your name? Well, it's the same name. I mean, you're Levi from Shevet Levi. So weren't you taught to pray to God with some kind? What did you call God? What did you say? You know, we always ask, you know, what does an atheist say when he stubs his toe? Oh, nothing, darn it. You know, he's got to put some name there. What name did you use? So Hashem goes and tells him, and it's really pretty mysterious. He gives Moshe, in a sense, two choices. And he says First of all, Vayomer Elokim al Moshe. Isn't that interesting? Elokim said to Moshe, that should have been the answer, right? And it should have been God. Elokim said to Moshe, okay, man, that's his name, Elokim. Isn't that a name of God? But he goes further. When you read the text, it's very confusing. And he says, I will be what I will be. And that's what you will say. Well, that's one name. Kotomar Livnei Israel, he shortens it. I guess God, like a lot of us, he gives himself a nickname. His full name is but he says to Moshe, tell him sent you. And then he also says, Kotomar Livnei Israel, Hashem Elokei Avotechem, Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Shalachani Alechem. He gives another name. So Rashi and others have that famous comment that says, I've been with Am Yisrael through other crises. I'll be with you through this crisis too. And Moshe says, that's not what they want to hear. They want to hear something more upbeat. Don't say, I was with you when you suffered earlier and I'm with you when you're suffering now. Okay, that's nice, but I want to hear something maybe a little bit more optimistic, not just about our suffering. And so essentially Hashem is saying, okay, then just tell them that just as I helped your ancestors out of their crises, and they were able to overcome their issues, they overcame the Akedah, and if they fought wars, they won the wars. And Yaakov had his own crises with Yosef, but it had a happy ending because they were reunited. You'll have a happy ending too. So that's another slant that he's giving that's a little bit more optimistic and upbeat. The God that helped your ancestors will help you now. But the truth is that Hashem is really saying that God has many, many names and many modes. There are, in a sense, different, if we can phrase it like this, many different sides or representations of Hashem. It could be the God of justice, Elohim. It could be the God of mercy, Hashem, or Keil Rachum B'Chanun. It could be Tzur Yisrael. It could be Ish Milchama, Hashem Ish Milchama. God has many names. In fact, there is a very almost puzzling midrash or chazal that says the entire Torah, if you took the letters and you unscramble them and you rearrange them, they form the different names of God. There are so many different names of God that you could use all the letters and you would continue to come up with them. And then Hashem makes the statement, Zeh Shmi La'olam v'zeh Zichri L'dor v'dor. This is my name forever. Well, which is his name forever? So the Rashi and others talk about the fact that chaser vav, the word la'olam, forever, is missing the vav, and therefore it can be read differently. It can be read le'alem. In other words, that it is hidden. The word alem, like ne'elam, disappearing. The name, my name, says Hashem, in a sense, is hidden. Eheyeh sher eheyeh, I'll be with you, but I will do what I do. I am what I am. I'm going to be what I will be. You're going to have to trust me. I have my own plan. You may not understand it, but every good relationship in our lives is built upon trust. Whether it's parent-child, husband-wife, employer-employee, teacher, student, it's built upon trust. And at some point, Hashem is saying that you're not going to be able to understand everything. You're going to have to, at some point, trust me. This is why when Hashem says to Moshe, if you want to give them a sign, tell the people that they shall worship me on this mountain. Well, that's not much comfort to a slave. When I get to the mountain and I've been freed from slavery and I get the Torah and I'm at Har Moriah, yeah, then I can appreciate it. But now Hashem is saying, you'll have to trust me. That's the end game. You're going to get out of slavery. You're going to get the Torah. You're going to become a nation. You're going to stand at the foot of Har Sinai. But you're just going to have to trust me and have faith that that's where we're going. And therefore, although he's giving these different names and indicating that God is whatever happens to us in life, that you can stamp God's name on that, the names are going to be different, indicating perhaps different sides or different modes of God. Finally, I would say that this concept of names, the names of the people, the names of Hashem, it morphs also into the beginning of next week's Parsha, because there it says another, and now we can perhaps better understand it. Va'era el Avraham Yitzchak vel Yaakov v'kel Shaddai u'shmi Hashem lo nodati lehem. I appeared to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov under the guise of the name El Shaddai, the God who creates, who says at the time of creation, die enough, he's the perfect chef with all the ingredients that make up the world. But my name Hashem, I didn't make known to them. Well, of course, that's hard to understand because we see the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four-letter name of Hashem. We see that, or the 72 or 42 letter, we see that name used frequently in the first book of the Torah. So what do you mean that I didn't make it known to them? So here, Chazal say something that we can appreciate, the Jewish people, but especially those who live in the state of Israel, that they answer and say, the name Hashem, which is the Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, I will be what I will be, that name is really saying, I will fulfill the promises that I make. You're faithful to me, I'll be faithful to you, fulfill the promises. Say Chazal, lots of promises were made to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The most important one, and always the first one, by the way, you can look anytime when Hashem first meets the Avot, he says, the main promise is, I will bring you to the land of Israel, and that will be your eternal homeland. Says Hashem, until now, I really haven't done that. I've promised it. I haven't broken my promise. That's a name that was never completed in their lifetime, but it will be in yours. This generation, well, actually, because of the Meraglim, not that generation, but your children anyway, they will live to see that great promise fulfilled when I bring you back to Israel and you establish yourselves there as a nation. We who live in Israel today, we have the schut, that promise that was made to our ancestors, to our grandparents and great-grandparents and all the generations going back, that they held on to that promise. And for pretty much all of them, it never was fulfilled. This generation has seen that promise fulfilled. And we lose sight of that. We sometimes are short-sighted where we don't truly appreciate what we have seen and what we have experienced in our lifetime to come back to Israel. But this is the fulfillment of all the promises that our ancestors prayed for. I spoke to a group of people once in Chutz La'aretz, and whenever I speak in Chutz La'aretz, I have one rule. I tell them from the very beginning, I'm assuming this is the only time I'm going to speak to you, because after I finish, you won't want me back, which is usually true. And I said to them, you know, all the prayers of your ancestors, they were potent prayers, but they were unfulfilled. And they expected and hoped and believed and dreamed that there would come along a generation that would see those prayers answered. And I say to them, you're that generation. But if you don't come here, then what does that say about all their prayers? That they really prayed in vain. And they prayed for all that. But they hoped that you would someday come along and make those prayers come true. But if you have that opportunity to do so and you don't, what would your ancestors think of you looking down at you from heaven? They didn't perhaps have the opportunity to fulfill it, but you do. And so this name of Hashem, this ultimate name of Hashem, that he fulfills his promises, the greatest of which is to bring us as a nation to our own land. This is something that we have seen in our generation and something that should never be taken for granted. And when we use that name and we daven to Hashem, we are saying essentially to Hashem, thank you for keeping your promise. Something you said thousands of years ago that today is coming true. So all of these ideas about names justify the calling of this Parsha and the entire Sefer, the book of Shemot. Even though, again, we're not necessarily fixating on individual names, but we are setting the tone that we are a nation, and in a nation, individual names are subsumed within the majority. But at the same time, never forget who you are, because that's what brought you here, and that's what will give you the individuality and the personality and the uniqueness to contribute to that nation. If everybody does their share and contributes their particular gift, then the nation will always be the greatest nation in the world. And with that, I thank you all for being here. I say to you, Shabbat Shalom. And if you want to ask or comment, unmute yourself and feel free.
I think it's in Tehillim. There's one of the Tehillim where it talks about how Hashem numbers all the stars and gives each one a name.
Yeah.
And this idea of giving a name, I often use that when I teach in school. This is what was not done during the Shoah. The names were taken away.
Right, as we said,
your name is your sense of self.
By the way, that's why we believe that when you bestow a name on a child, the mother, father, and Hashem are all partners in the giving of that name.
Yeah.
And that you have a certain Ruach HaKodesh that says, this is the name. Now, there are exceptions. If you give a name, we're told that's really, not a good name, a name of, you don't name a baby Jewish girl Vashti. But the name you give is important. And I think I've told this story before, that when a couple named, my shul, when a couple named a child and time went by and they used the name, and then they came and they said, Rabbi, we want to change the name. I said, why? Was there a mistake between you? Somebody didn't get the message when they did the naming? No, we just decided after using the name for a while, we don't like the name. It was a perfectly good name. And I said to them, I won't change it. But it's our child. I said, you can go somewhere else and find somebody else. I said, you can add a name if you really want to, but I won't change that name. That name was bestowed upon you, and there was a touch of God in the giving of that name. And somehow that's the name. I'm not a great believer in people coming along and saying, this is not a good name for you. If it's a name. I was talking to Rav Meir that his wife's name is Rachel, and there's somebody came along and said, it's not good to have a name that starts with a resh because the word Ra, evil, starts with the resh. I said, well, nothing could be more insane than that because every single letter of the alphabet has positive and negative words associated with it. And what are you doing to Rachel Imenu? So I'm not a great believer in people who claim some kind of psychic sense to change a perfectly good name. That's me. But names are crucial. And that's why we say that the word inside the word neshama is the word shame, name, because your name is representative of your neshama. There is a certain soul that every name has. Anyone else want to make a comment or a question?
Yeah, I just want to say that you were talking about how important it is to live in Eretz Yisrael, and it reminds me that I made Aliyah almost 21 years ago now, and I've never left. I feel like it's so important just to be here, and
it's important that you're here, so
I love it. I never want to leave. B'ezrat Hashem, I'll never have to leave.
Okay. Well, if things continue as they are, you never will leave. Skies are closed, planes are flying.
That's something else.
So it's better to have the opportunity to leave than not leave. Let's put it that way.
Possibility, but that's something else. Okay.
Okay. Correct. All right.
Rabbi Weiss?
Yes, ma'am.
Rochelle Pelsner?
Yes.
Not me. You said that you don't believe in people changing their children's name. I'm not disagreeing with you, but at the same time, in the Torah itself, Avram is changed to Avraham, Sarai to Sarah, Yaakov to Yisrael.
Yeah.
So there are instances where Hashem felt that it was necessary to change a name.
Gods and angels can do that.
But how do we know? If you said if Hashem is part of the equation when parents are choosing the name?
Yeah, each of those, it's interesting. Your point is well taken. Each of those name changes have specific reasons and specific blessings kind of added onto their name. They're not, really, the only name you see that's completely changed, right, is that Yaakov names his last child Ben Oni. Rachel names him Ben Oni, and Yaakov changes it to Binyamin, because Ben Oni has some very negative connotations. And therefore I said, there are circumstances that you can change names when there's a negative connotation to it. But taking a perfectly good name, Leah, Rachel, Shmuel, you name it, so to speak, and just deciding to change that, I'm not a great believer in that. Although your point is well taken, that there are certain subtle changes that are made to these names. So I hear that. Good point.
But I hear your point as well. So I'm just...
Okay. Then we're a mutual admiration society.
Yes, hi, Stewart, it's Gila. I wanted to chime in with Leah that I haven't left the borders of Israel since October 2018. And for me, it's like some kind of magic medicine. I feel like I'm in some kind of Superman comic, and I'm in some kind of Star Trek cabin where I'm being rooted and strengthened and healed, and I have no wish to break the spell.
Good for you. There is a whole halachic discussion, which we're not going to get into, about the permissibility of leaving Israel, and when it's justified and when it isn't. The truth is that Hasidic rabbis are constantly flying back and forth for vacations and to go to spas and to visit different countries. So it's not as hard and fast a rule as some make it out to be, but there definitely is an issue of trying to limit leaving Israel unless you have a really good reason. And there are some really good reasons that are given, but Bezrat Hashem, you know, we should be able to find everything we need here, so that there really should be no reason to have to leave. So I'm sorry to leave you now, but wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom. And for now, I believe we're staying with the time at 5:45, but if something changes, you know, then I will appraise you. Okay, Miriam had a quick question. The name Hashem itself means the name. What exactly is that referring to? Well, yeah, that's a good point. That we're just saying, because we don't want to pronounce the Yud Kei Vav Kei the way it's written, which is something we learned from another place. You don't pronounce it as written. So we have a kind of a reference to it, and just really Hashem, the name. And that is kind of referring us back to the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And I won't even get into the fact that Hashem is Moshe's name backwards. You can work on that. It's not that, you know, for dyslexic people, it works even better. So,
but
Stewart? Yes. One more point, yes.
Short question. Why, from where do we learn, or whatever, why do we know that we're not supposed to pronounce that name? Why do we not pronounce it? What does that come from?
Okay, so next time I'll give you the source and tell you the derivation of how they learned that out. If you remind me at the beginning or the end of next class, I'll tell you. But yes, it's learned out that you don't pronounce it the way that it's written. But it's a little bit long for now, the answer, but next time I'll give you the full answer. So tune in. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.